Hey, it's Matt again. Just wanted to let you know that I do not have a video that accompanies this podcast. We had some technical difficulty when recording with Mike, and I had to go in and work some editing magic. So, no video this week, but videos will be back next week with our next podcast. But this is still a great one, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Mobile Hunters Dojo. Take a seat on the mat and get ready to learn from today's best mobile hunting masters. I'm your host, the White Belt Sensei, Matt Lear. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Mobile Hunters Dojo. All right, everybody, welcome back to the dojo. Come on in and kick off your shoes and take a seat on the mat. I have a special guest with me today, Mike Athey. I ran into Mike on Instagram, and what kind of drew me to him was he was really grinding it out, hunting quite a bit this season, and was giving these updates almost daily, it seemed like. And I got kind of entrenched into the story. And then I started poking around his Instagram, really loved what he was doing. Got to talk a little bit through messaging, and then we got to meet each other in Harrisburg. So pretty pumped to have you on, man. Really appreciate you coming out. Welcome to the dojo.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Matt. Congratulations on the 200. I think we're all a little jealous. We're all searching for that. Definitely looking forward to getting into some good conversation here.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Can you give us like a little bit of background, like how long you've been hunting, where you're at, kind of the terrain that you're hunting?
Yeah, so I'm 34 years old. I started hunting at a early age. My dad got me into it. I think I took my first deer at 6, 7, 8 years old, somewhere in that range. Got taken turkey hunting at a real early age too. So spent a lot of time in the timber early on. I actually live in central Maryland, so I'm about 3.5 hours from the beach and about 2.5, 3 hours from the mountains. So I've experienced a little bit of everything, the big woods of Western Maryland, and then I've hunted the sandy, flat ag land of the Eastern Shore. So it's a diverse state, which makes it interesting.
Do you ever go like out of state, or do you stay in Maryland primarily?
Yeah, so I've hunted Ohio, the southeastern port of Ohio. I've done that 2 or 3 times now, which the terrain that I was hunting was pretty similar to what I have experienced in Western Maryland. Um, and then this past year, I ventured out to Indiana. I think we were out there at about the same
Yep.
time during the rut. I'd never stepped foot in Indiana. Didn't know anything about it. Just kind of picked a couple pieces of public on the map, and I was like, oh, I'm going to challenge myself, see if I can get on one pretty quickly on a short period of time.
So in Indiana, I think our experiences were a little different. Josh and I were down there, and there's around 250 guys on, 1,000 acre piece. Like, it was insane. And I think I heard on a podcast you had done recently that, you were running into like almost nobody down there. How did it turn out for you? How was the hunt down there for you?
Yeah, so the first sit I did, I got skunked, and I got down early because I was like, this ain't it. I went in blind to a pin. We spent the first day scouting, so we had a couple ideas of where we wanted to be. I got down early, and I had another pin marked that was essentially just a pinch point. And I think I got there at around noon and got set up, kind of got down in there. There were some scrapes, but the sign was kind of sporadic. Uh, I ended up seeing at least a 130, 140 at like 230.
Wow.
I watched him cross at like 80 yards, and then I spent a lot of time in that general area pretty much the next week. Uh, and I ended up seeing three or four other bucks that I would have shot.
Yeah.
So I was in the right area. I just couldn't capitalize on that micro adjustment to seal the deal
Yeah.
with the bow.
So you mentioned micro adjustments, and when we do a podcast like this, I'll send out this little funny questionnaire and ask people kind of what their strengths are. And you mentioned that micro adjustment. Can you kind of define what a micro adjustment, or even just give an example if it's hard to define, but what does micro adjustments mean to you?
So if I'm hunting, so I have I'm fortunate to have a lot of time off based on the work I do. So I put a lot of stock into my on stand observations,
Hmm.
what I'm seeing. So um, I may set up in an area, signs, fresh, and if I see a buck that I want to kill do something once, I take note of it.
Hmm.
If I see a separate deer or that same buck do that same thing twice, I'm moving
Hmm.
because now it's a pattern.
Yep.
Like first it's a fluke, second time, third time it's like okay, that's where I need to be, and it may be something as small as let's say they're skirting a downfall just on the north side of it. That would be where when the time's right and the wind's right, I'm going to pull my stand and I'm going to move to the north side of that downfall. Now, that might only be a 60-yard move. Like I'm not talking moving a half
Yep.
mile, but moving that 40 yards, moving that 30 yards, because it's great. We all want to see big deer, but I think we're all trying to kill big deer too. So as much as I love seeing them, I'm trying to, get in that 20, 30-yard range. So that's like kind of the micro adjustment that I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I definitely, I think, I started to incorporate that into my style probably like 5, 6 years ago. So I think micro adjusting is a big part of the game. I mean, I can attribute like probably three of the last four bucks to micro adjustments. You're hunting a variety of you're hunting public, you're hunting private, you're hunting family owned, like wherever the deer are, that's where you are essentially.
Yeah.
And to make those adjustments really quick, I want to talk about gear in the sense of, you know, what's allowing you to be mobile like this. I
Hmm.
never like to put too much focus on products because I think people spend too much time on that. But in this sense, going mobile and be able to make micro adjustments, I think it plays a big part. What is your setup that allows you to kind of bounce around like that?
So the past couple years, I've been using a Lone Wolf Custom Gear 1.0
Yep.
with two 20-inch double steps with 20-inch aiders. Um, this year, I'm adding a point 0.5 to my setup uh, and 14-inch doubles. And the reason being is, yeah, weight wise, the difference between the two setups, we're talking, a pound and a half, 2 pounds. But when you're setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and
Yeah.
all that stuff adds up. So when I hang that stand, I don't want to be sitting up there going, man, I got to tear this stand down
Hmm.
and move it. I don't want to have to think about that. Like that shouldn't be what's preventing me from getting in the game.
Hmm.
Um, I'm extremely minimalist as far as like what I take into the woods with me. Maybe not as minimalist as like Dan Infault, just a release and a bow. But I think the biggest pack that I carry is the sling bag from Lone Wolf Custom Gear. I
Hmm.
think they call it the hybrid pack. That's kind of like my rut bag. And then for the early season, I'll just take the waist pack
Okay.
and yeah, like just super light.
And early season for you, September, like beginning of
Yeah,
September ish, right?
we open. It's always the Friday following Labor Day.
Okay.
So I think this year, 2024, it's going to be like September 9th,
Okay. And then how late does your season go?
January 31st.
Are you grinding it out all the way to the 31st?
I'll be honest with you, January is a tough
It
because
is, man.
I hit it so hard through November and December that when January comes around, I definitely tail off.
Yeah.
Um, I'll still hunt, but I'm dealing with shed bugs. Um, it's hard to my family piece that I hunt doesn't really hold them that time of year just
Yep.
because there's not a lot of late season food. Um, a lot of the publics around here are burnt by that time. Not saying you can't get it done,
Hmm.
but I definitely tail off at that point. Like I
Yeah.
might, hunt a couple Saturdays or something, but I'm not burning my time at work during that period when I can save it for the following
Yeah.
late October, November, time frame.
I'm all about that. I mean, especially just, as families get older and, you just get more responsibility, you really have to be wise with your time. So I'm typically, a lot of times I'm done by November 15th, and then I take a break for a couple of weeks because that's when our gun season starts. And then I hunt, probably like mid-December till the end of January for us, so I want to use my time wisely. So I totally get that. So I want to just kind of break down. Now, I imagine, have you been living in the same area for a long time? Kind of
Yes,
hunting the same areas?
yeah. So the same general area. I moved once where we moved about an hour west,
Okay.
but it's still the same general area.
Yep.
We're kind of in a suburban area,
Yep.
so like I said, we have areas where there's a 10 acre patch of woods surrounded by houses. So I've always kind of hunted that, and then having that family piece out in Western Maryland, that opened up opportunities out there for me. So I'm familiar with all that ground out there as well.
So you got historical data. Are you doing any like postseason scouting? Is that part of your regimen at all?
So we talked about this at the Harrisburg show. Um, Postseason scouting for me, if I have a free Saturday, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but if there is overtime available for my job, I will work the overtime because I can take the overtime and paid leave. So I prioritize getting the time off so that I can be off work when it's time to kill.
Yep.
Um, my postseason scouting in Western Maryland, that's during spring turkey season
Yep.
because we don't experience green up in Western Maryland until like May.
Hmm.
So when I'm spring turkey hunting, there's no green up. I'm doing postseason scouting as I'm turkey hunting.
Yeah.
Um, Down where I live, green up's usually 2 to 3 weeks before that. So if I'm going to postseason scout here, it's on a Saturday or a Sunday. Whenever I'm off work, and I'll try and do that. But like I said, I'm prioritizing having that time off for when I can actually be in the timber to kill. Um, so that's pretty much how I do it. I'm a
Yeah.
little different than a lot of guys, uh, but I would rather have that. I mean, it's great knowing, postseason, oh, there's 12 rubs along this ridge and there's 4 scrapes, and this is where I needed to be last November. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you need to be next November. Whether you have crop rotation, pressure, um, predator pressure, all that stuff, it's going to change.
Hmm. No, I'm torn with that right now. So like Brian Rogers, I had him on, a few podcasts back, and he was saying he does all of his scouting like in 7 days. And I know what I was doing last year. I was scouting every weekend,
Mhm.
and it's so funny. I put 200 miles into a piece, and I never hunted it. I just
Right.
it was the things that changed in that season had to do with me. My work schedule changed, everything changed, and so all of that was a little bit of like wasted time. And then that was a new piece for me too. And I probably ran 30 cameras on that piece. And that was very helpful. I think running the cameras was more helpful than actually, doing all the boots on the ground scouting on that piece because it told me really like I have a very small window there to get it done
Right,
and very limited area to do it in. So that was helpful. But most of my time ended up being wasted. So I started to think to myself, I got to get a little bit more efficient at this, and then how much value am I really getting out of this postseason scouting? So this year is going to be a lot less for me. I'm going. I hunt primarily all out of state. And
right.
so I don't have pieces that I have a lot of historical data on. So I do have to do some postseason scouting so I can learn the terrain a little bit and give myself better odds. But I'm going to get it done probably in about four, yeah, 3 to 4 trips. So that'll probably be around 7 to 8 days for me, and that'll be it. Because I do agree with you. Things just change so much. So I'm glad you're a different voice in the
Yeah,
atmosphere right now.
yeah. So I am doing a trip to Indiana. I did take a day off work. I'm going to do a 3-day weekend there in that same general area that I hunted last year, because I'm committed to going back there this year. I,
Yep.
I I have unfinished business there,
Yep.
so I am going to go out there in March and do postseason scouting and just try and narrow down a handful of areas that I feel confident when I go back out there this upcoming November that I can get in a tree and kill, or at least be somewhat in the game from the get go. So I'm not wasting 2 or 3 days trying to find deer.
Hmm.
Um, but I haven't taken a day off work to postseason scout in years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a camera game at all? I mean, are you throwing out cameras at all during the
So
year?
yeah, so I'll put I got a handful of cameras I'll throw on the family piece. They're all on scrapes. Most of them are annual scrapes, hit all year long. I'll put those out in August, and that's how I get my inventory. As far as checking those cameras, I don't really care. I'll check them for inventory usually early September as I'm hunting. Like if I happen to walk by a camera or I get a rainy day, I'll pull the cards. But other than that, I'm not hunting based on the cameras at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so this year you killed a buck, a gray buck, by the way. And
Yeah,
that
thank
was,
you.
am I correct? Was that on a smaller piece of property that you just picked up?
Yeah, I picked up permission on that piece probably 2 or 3 years ago, but
Okay.
it's only about 12 acres. Yeah, it's only
Yeah.
12 acres, but it backs up to about 200 acres.
Yep.
And I don't have permission on the 200 acres, but the 12 acres I have permission on, it's essentially a big, thick creek bottom. Not big as in 12 acres, but it's thick and it hunts bigger than 12 acres
Yeah.
because of how thick it is.
So I'm really interested in this because, as we talk about, I think that conversation about postseason scouting, like that's a really popular thing that everybody's kind of talking about and doing and how many miles we put in. I mean, and I was doing it too. I was posting how many miles I was putting in and doing all the walking videos. Um, but I love that you have a different outlook on it. Same thing with the cameras on this one. Um, so on that piece, you didn't run a camera. You could tell by looking at the terrain and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
the setup of things that was going to be a good place, good spot for you. You kind of walk us through that hunt a little bit because, like, starting off that when you first see the buck, we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of repeating what you already said on another podcast, but I want to make a point with it. So how did that
Right.
go? How'd your hunt go?
Right. So I know from my historical observations on that piece that there are a lot of does. And when I mean a lot, I might see 15 to 20 does on that piece. So I know that that doe group comes into heat early November.
Mm.
and I stay out of there until that Halloween, November 1st, 2nd time frame. I won't hunt it until that time frame. So I get in there, I think it was November 1st, and I laid eyes on a really good buck, and I ended up moving on him the next morning, and I actually hit him but couldn't find him. Uh, I then went to Indiana, so I gave that property 10 days rest. I come back and I get into a tree that I can see a majority of the property, but not all of it. And it essentially, quote unquote, an observation sit. Um, I see that buck at about 2:30 in the afternoon, cruising along, eating acorns, bumped a couple does, watched him bed down twice, and then I actually watched him that evening cross the road onto some big ag farm country. That's just a paved road. The next morning, I got in there and I saw him again midday, do the same thing, hanging out, make a scrape, lay down, make a rub, eat some acorns, chase a couple does. And I knew that there was a scrape that was on the south end of the property. So I actually, when I watched him bed down, he was behind a downfall. And I tore my stand down and eased out of there and circled to that south side scrape because I had a feeling he was going to hit that. And I think I posted on my Instagram story, I'm like, he's bedded about 100 yards that way. He's going to come down this way tonight. I'm going to kill him. I watched every deer that he was with come to that scrape that night, except for him. Mm. I don't know if he laid up till dark or whatever. But so that's 2 days in a row. I've observed him in that same 80-yard circle, super comfortable, relaxed, not on alert, no idea in the world I was there. That night, I stayed up and watched the Ravens game. It was a late night, and then I woke up early the next morning, probably like 3:30, 4 a.m. and with the full intention of getting into that 80-yard circle. So I go in blind. I don't have a tree picked out, and in the dark, I picked what I thought was the best tree for shooting lanes and all that stuff. I hang the stand, and I think I also posted in my Instagram story, like, this buck comes here between 11 and 2. Like, he's going to be here midday. I'm waiting him out. Maybe 15 minutes past first light, I hear a grunt, and it's that deep gut grunt of a mature deer. And I was like, that's him. I already knew that was him. By the time I saw him, he was 25 yards from me, just walking through. And I ended up shooting him at 8 yards. And that was it. Yeah. And I got to watch the morning wake up after that. It was nice. I had the full expectation of eating lunch and everything in there, and I'm done by 7:30.
So that story has like a lot in it. So
yeah,
you talk about the micro adjustments. So obviously, I mean, you're seeing where the action's going down. You realize where you have to get into. You make that adjustment. The one thing I want to point out is that you actually, before all of this, and you said you've had this piece for like 3 years or so.
Yeah, it's about 3 years.
You're actually filing away micro like data. So you're realizing, okay, this is a heavy doe area. These are when the does come into heat here. I need to play this timing perfect. And it's that attention to the little details that I think is so important. I would walk into an area, and a lot of time I just had a macro, viewpoint of things. And it was Dan Infalt actually that had me, like, he was talking about these little like breaks on twigs and these little scratches on limbs. And it made me start focusing on the micro data that's out there. That's exactly what you've done. And a lot of people when they haven't gotten to the stage where they're able to put like that wall monitor, on the wall, there's a sense of urgency. And I used to have that. And when I heard people talk about historical data, I'm like, I don't have historical data. I don't have time for
Right.
that. I need to get out there and kill now. But you did this in 3 years on
Yeah.
a small chunk. This is 12 acres, right?
Yep. Yep.
And
About 12 acres.
within 3 years, you've kind of learned what the piece is, when to hunt it.
Mhm.
You follow away that data, and then I mean that's a short period of time, and you go in and you kill a really impressive buck using the micro data, I'll call it, and then the micro adjustments. I think that's just amazing. I love how that came down all together for
Yeah.
you.
And it changes on the size of the property too. My family farms about 100 acres. I've been hunting for 20 years, and I still don't know everything.
Yeah.
But I do know that that early November window, the does aren't in heat yet.
Hmm.
So I will tend to hunt that more towards like the November 10th through 17th time frame.
Yep.
That's when the rut activity really ramps up on that piece. So that's, obviously historical observations that I've made too. Not
Yeah.
saying a deer can't come in early, but I've actually taken more time off in September to hunt the family farm piece because I found that I have early season food, whether it be acorns or beans. Um, that's when I'll prioritize my time in those trees and staying out of the little 12-acre piece because it's not right there yet.
Yep. So I was just getting ready to ask you, what is so we're not doing any like postseason or preseason scouting. Um, are you doing any like observation stuff in the summertime at all? Are you trying to like glass fields or do anything like that? No?
No, I'll just let the cameras on the scrapes pick my inventory,
Yep.
and then the only thing that I need to know is that he's there and there's a deer I want to shoot,
Hmm.
and then from that point it's now we're hunting him.
Yep.
Now we're trying to figure out where he is, where he's living. Um, but I like to do that when I can kill him. So I'm going to wait until season opens to really dive in. And uh, I kind of look at it. My mindset is when I walk into that timber, I'm trying to be the ultimate predator in that timber. So if you got coyotes or bears, the hell with them. You're the alpha. So I'm going in there to kill and hunt him down. And do I get burnt? All the time? I mean, that's why it's hunting. But I'm going in with that mindset every time I walk into the timber that I'm in here to kill.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I was just getting ready to say, so let's start off on the beginning of the season. It's day one. What are
Hmm.
what's your game plan? What are you doing on that day as you start your season off?
Yeah, so day one, I hunt mornings in the early season.
Hmm.
This past year, I actually had more action in the September mornings than I did in the evenings. And I don't know if that's predator or hunting pressure or whatever, but I will go into transition areas. So I know where the destination food source is, and it's obvious. If there's a soybean field, the deer are going to be trailing from the soybean fields back to bed. So I'm going to hunt those transition areas. If I can locate acorns, that's good. Um, so that's kind of how I'm going to start my opening morning. And then based upon what I observe, I might do a micro adjustment, move 60, 70 yards, or I'm going to tear down completely and I'm going to scout midday. And midday in that early season might be 10, 10:30, 9:30. It just depends on the activity. So I'll get down and I'll start walking, wind in my face, and I might bump some deer, but at least I know, hey, deer bedding here. Um, and once I find something that's good or piques my interest, I'll hang that stand for the evening hunt. And then I'll go out, get a bite to eat, take a nap, and then come back in. My stand's already hung, and I'll hunt that evening. Depending on what I see, I might leave it and then hunt the next morning, or I might pull it again. It just depends what I observe and what the wind direction is going to do for the next day, like if we have a wind switch or something like that. But I hate hanging stands in the morning in the dark.
Yeah.
So if I can avoid that, that's what I'm going to try and do. Um, I'd rather hang in the daylight, make sure the setup's good, and then based on observations is going to dictate what I'm going to do. So yeah, it's just like a stick and move philosophy.
Yeah. Do you have a target buck in mind when on day one? I mean, because you've had your cameras running some intel for you. Are you typically
Mhm.
targeting a specific deer?
I usually have on that 100-acre piece, there's usually two or three
Mhm.
that I know about. Um, and I usually have my mind set on those two or three. And then, if something else comes through that gets me excited, that deer might get it too. But usually I have a couple options. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much like how I do it.
Yep. So you're walking in, doing obviously the bed to feed, transitional area. You're reading
Mhm.
sign as you're moving in and making these adjustments. What kind of sign are you looking for, during that time?
Yeah, that early, I I found I found fresh rubs that early. Um, that September 9th time frame, some of the deer will still be in velvet,
Hmm.
but I found some will shed out. So if I find a fresh rub, whether it be like one or two, and it falls in that transition area, now I'm starting to think, all right, is this a staging area? I'm just trying to read the terrain and where the bedding might be. Um, so looking for fresh rubs, obviously that early in the season, well used trails, tracks in mud. Those uh, scrapes might pop up during that time. Um, and then obviously food in the timber. So your white oak acorns. If you can find where acorns are dropping that early, those deer are going to hit those acorns.
Are you sitting in between? Or are you getting closer to bedding?
Uh, I will start further away from bedding and then kind of hunt my way towards it. I'm not going to dive into the thickest of the thick, the first morning because I usually have several days
Yep.
that I can gradually hunt my way in. Um, it's obviously situationally dependent.
Hmm.
If I find a white oak that's dropping acorns 80 yards from the thick bedding, I might dive right in. Um, but if I got a green soybean field and a bunch of well used trails going out to it, that might be an evening post where I'm only 40, 50 yards off that field.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. So moving into October, how does your game change as you start getting into October?
So it changes that I kind of back off a little bit. I have struggled and struggled and struggled from that first week of October through, that late teen 20th time frame. So I'll pick up more overtime. I'll work, spend time with the family, uh, and take care of the household obligations because the family knows that when Halloween gets here, I'm not going to be there or I'm going to be in the timber during the day. So I'll ease off of it as far as hunting. I might get a Saturday evening sit in, or we can hunt Sundays here. So I might do a Sunday morning. But as far as taking time off work during that time frame, I usually don't. It might be a day or two if I get a cold front or something that makes me want to get in the tree. Uh, as we get into that late October time frame, I take off Halloween week and I don't go back to work usually until about Thanksgiving week. So that's when my marathon starts.
So I love that you do that actually. I love that you back off and use your time wisely. I think especially in my early days, I would just try to force it, right? I'm out there the whole time and I'm burning myself out and honestly burning up my relational deposits that I've made with my family,
Right.
and so knowing when to say, hey, look, this isn't the time for me. This is, kind of when this is my bread and butter, this time frame, or these time
Hmm.
frames, I think is super smart to do. Um, and I see a lot of guys, especially here in Michigan, because we start October 1. Prior to that, we have several hunts. We have the youth hunt, we have like the veterans and disabilities hunt. And then October 1, I mean, it's like, I drive up and I don't even hunt on October 1s. I drive up and down the roads just to see everybody run into the woods.
Right.
That pressure hits, and then really it becomes pretty difficult to put one down here. And I watch guys invest all their time in that early season, and it's like, man, you really should just be waiting, until a little bit later in the season where your odds are going to go up. So I think that's a really wise thing to do. So I love that late October timeframe. So
Hmm.
what's your game plan then? So you said you say Halloween, starting Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween week.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget what the Monday is, but I'll take off that whole week. And I'm essentially starting from scratch again
Mm-hmm.
because all my September intel is now old
Yep.
as far as the sign. And then I've also been out of the timber consistently since the beginning of October. So that's about 3 weeks that I don't really know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going in with a blank slate. Now I'm starting to look for that pre rut, early rut sign, fresh scrapes, fresh rubs, clusters of rubs. I may check my cams early in that week just to see if the scrape activity's heating up yet. And I'm hunting fresh timber at that point. So I'm essentially hunting the way I would the early September, except I'm focusing more on that sign and not as much on that food.
Yeah. Are you starting to like zero in on like doe bedding at all, or are you still in the transitional areas?
So I've found that where I hunt, especially my family farm, we don't have areas that are quote unquote doe bedding and buck bedding. I call it like beds of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never had any luck with finding like a singular buck bed and he's bedding here and I need to be in this tree and then on this way he's going to exit the bed and then come by this tree. I've never had luck doing that. Um, I've seen bucks bed in next to a fallen down tree, and then I've hunted that same area for 5 days and I've seen another deer lay there. Um, so bedding where I am is more general areas.
I think it's really important to point out like there's multiple seasons within the season, right? And it really doesn't matter when your time frame, like if you start in September, if you start in October, there's multiple seasons within the season, and you have to adjust your style accordingly with that. And that's what I like about your style is that it's very like in the moment. I'm seeing what's going on. I'm watching the movement, and then I'm going to adjust off of that, what you call micro adjustments, and you're going to move in. So does it? I'm wondering then is I feel like if I were to adopt that style, it would take a little bit of pressure off of like I have to kill today. Like I think sometimes I get into a mode where I'm like every time I go out, it has to be like a kill opportunity. And honestly, the way that you're doing it, I feel like it's like, no, It's recognizing I have time and I'm going to make a very strategic move based off of what I'm seeing. So this is not the kill moment, but this is kind of the catalyst that starts me down the road to the kill. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like
Yeah.
that would take some pressure off. So I'm assuming you don't feel pressure every time you walk out in the woods, like I'm going to kill tonight or I have to kill tonight.
Well, I'm definitely going in with the mindset that I'm going to kill, and I'm trying to put my position in the best place to kill based on the intel or the observations I make. But if I don't, tomorrow's a new day,
Hmm.
and I'm going to be back out there. So yeah, I may get frustrated, and I may go home and soak in my sorrows a little bit, like, man, it didn't happen. But when that alarm clock goes off the next day, it's like, hey, fresh start.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just trying to always stay positive from that point.
And I also think is that one question I have is, are you always moving? I mean, are there days that you're just kind of like, no, I'm sticking in and I'm staying in this spot, this location for a little while, or is your style like, no, I'm moving every single day. I'm kind of making an adjustment every day.
So no, absolutely not. When I was in Indiana, I want to say I did 3 all-day sits in a row out of the same tree
Yeah.
because I knew where I was a prime cruising area. It was a pinch point, and I needed to put my time into that spot. And it was only a matter of time before I had an opportunity. So I'll grind that out. I'll do all day sits, like moose, dark to
Yeah.
dark, all week long. Um, but like I said, it's all about confidence. Like if I get into an area and by 9 o'clock I'm like, this ain't it. I'm moving
Yep.
and I'm gonna go find it and set up, and then I might hunt that for a day and a half, 2 days. It just kind of depends.
Yep.
Yeah, it just depends on you reading the terrain and where you're at and the sign, and if you have high confidence in a level, put the time in there. I mean, if you have high confidence in a spot, put the time in, especially during that rut period. I can't tell you how many deer, big deer, I've seen between 10 and 3 or 10 and 2. That middle of the day time period when a lot of guys are getting down and moving, I might hold tight.
Yep.
um, I've gotten down at 3 or 4 in the evening before,
Hmm.
just because maybe it's super cold and it's frigid, and I've done 8 hours on stand. I'm like, all right, I'm getting to get down at 3:30 and try and figure out a spot for tomorrow morning. Um, it's all situationally dependent. Um, when to put the pedal on the gas and move, and then when to back off. And all right, now it's time to just sit in the tree and hunt.
And you're basing that off of, I think, kind of what you're seeing during that time period. So if we're talking rut time period,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, if a
Yeah.
couple, a day or a couple days go by and you're not seeing the rut action, I assume you're getting down and making
I'm
moves.
moving.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Unless you're in like one of those really solid pinch points that you might have some historical data on that says, if I sit here 4 days, it's going to happen. And there's
Right.
places like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, what I like about your style is that it seems very freeing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I watch us get into these. I always do this. This is how I hunt, the rut. This is how I hunt this, or I always hunt out of a saddle, or I
Right.
only hunt out of, a tree stand. We kind of get into those like, this is how I do it, where your style I feel like is very freeing, where I'm, what, I'm going to do it this way this day, and based off of what I'm feeling, my confidence level, what I'm seeing, I might do something completely different the next day,
Yeah.
uh, you know,
Absolutely.
yep. Yeah, I think I would imagine that would probably up your odds doing that, because I think it just keeps you more in tune with what's going on. It keeps you sharper because you have to pay attention in order to make these micro moves. And you're not just kind of relying on, like, this is how I do it, And
Right.
in the old days for me, that was it. It was like, this is how I do it. I always sit here,
Yeah.
and this is what I do during the season. And essentially then I was just kind of hoping, like I hope something comes by when I'm doing what I always do. And it just really didn't work out for me all that much. So so in your rut period, you're making those adjustments, and if it doesn't get done in the rut, um, are you switching things up into the late season, into like December time period? And one question I have is, how often do you actually get to December time period where you are still trying to get it done?
So in Maryland, we're a heavy tag state.
Yeah.
So we get 2 bucks, and you also have the opportunity to get a bonus buck stamp. So you can kill up to 3. So I'm hunting in Maryland because I don't think I've never tagged out with
Okay.
killing 3,
Yeah.
120 to 130 class deer. Um, so as our opening day of rifle season in Maryland is always the Saturday following Thanksgiving. So I will hunt that, and usually the following week, and I'll hunt it with my bow, or I think I've hunted it with my bow the past couple years. But when that comes in, now I'm transitioning to escape routes and the surrounding hunting pressure.
Hmm.
So I know on my family farm, I can walk the fence line and see at least 4 or 5 tree stands from the
Hmm.
neighbors. So I know where they're going to be. Um, so then, based on wind direction, I'll set up on the escape route from the bedding area,
Yeah.
or the closest bedding area. Um, as we get into later that mid-December timeframe, obviously you have that second rut where those yearlings are starting to come in.
Yep.
So I'm still hunting the fresh sign and trying to find doe groups. As December gets into towards Christmas and that time frame, the deer in Western Maryland will start to herd up because they're getting into that late season pattern. It's cold. It's usually a lot of snow on the ground. So now we're looking at food.
Yep.
Whether that be a cut cornfield, leftover acorns. We're hunting feed pattern at that time. So it's essentially your September movement, but now you're in December. But you may have a new or different food source than what September was. As January approaches, that's where the burnout happens for
Yeah.
me, and that month's tough. Uh, I can understand that there's opportunity to be had during that month, um, especially if you're running corn piles.
Hmm.
But I don't bait. I don't bait. There are neighbors that bait, and I may hunt in that transition area to their bait pile. But I'm not going to put. Me personally, I'm not putting out 200 pounds of corn and sitting over it. That's just
No.
not me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, with what do you do if your property doesn't have food? Like,
Don't hunt
yeah,
it.
I knew the
Yeah.
answer. I wanted to hear it, but
Don't
yeah,
hunt it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you're gonna go out and find a new piece, hit some public.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My property, it has food around it, but it's usually all gone by that end of December time frame. And I've hunted January there, and it's a ghost town, and I can't even
Mhm.
find a deer track. It's like, why am I here?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wasting my time.
I think it's worth being said though, because I think sometimes guys just get like, God, this is my property. This is all I have to do. I still want to hunt. It's like, well, get up and go
Yeah.
find some new property then. If there's plenty of public out there that might have some food on it.
Yeah, and I used to be like that with my family piece. I wanted to take a higher caliber deer for years where, I'm looking for a 140, 150, and I'm hunting the family farm expecting to see a 140, 150, and it's like they're not here.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I need to go somewhere there is. like just keep keep your expectations realistic, adjust your expectations depending on where you're at. And if what your goal is isn't there, then you got to move
Yeah.
because it's not going to magically appear, most likely.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. I think there's big bucks here in Michigan. I know guys who are getting on them and killing them and all of that.
Hmm.
But for me, with as much time that I have, I'm like, I don't have the time that is required to get a buck like that here in Michigan. So I go out of state because I know my odds go up if depending on which state I go to, and I can get it done in less time. And so, in order to meet my expectations, that's what I do. I get up and I move out of Michigan and hunt somewhere else. I'd love to be able, and as soon as I get enough time to do it, I will. I'll invest here in Michigan and hunt here at some point. But yeah, I'm a firm believer of that. Get up and move, and that doesn't mean always out of state. It could mean just down the road to where you have more browse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a standing cornfield in the middle of December. So
Yeah, I don't care if I pull into the parking area and it either has a no trespassing sign and I'm the one to put the no trespassing sign there, or the parking area has a state sign that says WMA. I don't care. Like
yeah,
it's all the same to me, and
yeah.
I'm not going to be tied down to private or public. I'm just going to go to where the deer are.
Oh, man, that's going to be a highlight reel right there. We're going to put that in a highlight for real because there's again back to that. I only do this. I only hunt
Yeah,
public. I only hunt private. No, let's hunt the deer wherever they're at for sure. All right, going to try to wrap this up here a little bit, but I want to play like ask you a question. So for the guy who's very limited on time, and hasn't quite gotten it done yet, and what advice do you have for that guy um who's willing to do whatever it takes? Is like I said, pretty limited time. Maybe can't hunt as much as you do. He can't take a whole full month off, but he can take 2 weeks off in November. He can hunt a couple nights a week. He can hunt every weekend. Um, but it just hasn't clicked for him yet. What do you have any advice for him? I know it's a hard question, but I think there's a lot of
yeah.
guys like that out there.
I would say lock in mentally.
Mm,
Stay positive. Put yourself in places where you're confident, and it's a grind. Don't get sucked into the social media of, all the posts that you follow are 180, 190-inch deer. Um, it's a grind.
mhm.
So maintain positive mental clarity, stay focused, make the calculations based on the information that you have, and ultimately you're going to get an opportunity, especially during that rut time period. Um, by staying positive mentally and locked in, when it's time to execute that shot, stay in your shot process, from practice your tactical breathing, and execute what you've trained for all summer long or all fall long. I think a lot of the information being put out there is all about tactics, reading sign, where the deer are, what moves you're making. But ultimately, if you're not in it here,
Mhm.
it's not going to pan out. If you keep having a negative attitude, negative things are probably going to happen. So stay positive, keep grinding, and it'll happen.
Yeah, don't dismiss that either. I'm so glad you said that. I was expecting like, some kind of micro adjustment like tip or tactic, but I'm so grateful that you said that because it really is mindset first. If your mind
Yeah,
isn't there, if you're not positive, if you don't believe it's going to happen, then it really isn't going to happen. And I do think that is step number one. So I appreciate you saying that for sure.
yeah,
Um,
no problem.
and then I'll recap just kind of like our conversation a little bit is that stay aware while you're out there. You're constantly reading what's happening in the woods or not happening, and then make that adjustment. based off of what your gut's telling you, and don't be afraid to make that move and even move into that 80-yard circle to get it done. And essentially do whatever it takes to get it done. I mean, you're getting up early, going out there like with this buck that you killed this year, and
Mhm.
setting up in the dark and ready to sit all day, and you have your lunch to get it done. So man, I really appreciate you starting off with that tip of being in the right mindset, believe in yourself, stay positive, and then apply these things. Go out there and make those micro adjustments. You don't have to. You're living proof of this, Mike. You don't have to scout 200 miles a day or on the off season. You don't have to run 50 cameras. You don't have to do all those things. Pay attention to what the woods is telling you, remember it, the micro data, and then make those
Mhm.
micro adjustments and have a good positive attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't make it difficult, man. Just hunt. Be a predator.
Yeah,
Find
yeah,
them. Track them down. Like, don't overcomplicate it. It's not rocket science.
yeah. It's so true, man. I really do appreciate you. I appreciate that you bring in like a whole new, fresh perspective on this, and I think a lot of other guys probably think the same way as you too. And sometimes we're afraid to say it, like at the Harrisburg show when I was like, "Hey, what are you doing for like your postseason?" You're like, "Nah, I'm not." I'm like,
Yeah.
good. All right. That's good to hear. It's
Yes,
refreshing.
sir.
So, hey, I want to again, thanks for sticking in there we've had a little bit of technical difficulties. I really appreciate you sticking it out. I appreciate you taking time before going into, working late tonight. I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate us being able to talk and get to know each other. And I think, people are going to be really blessed by this podcast, and they're going to take away some real practical things that they can, use in their life. So thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Had a really great time. Like to do it again at some point.
I for sure will have you on again. It'll be great. Thanks everybody for coming in and taking a seat on the mat and listening this week. We are now dropping podcasts on Thursdays. So we've moved them from Wednesday to Thursday. So next week, Thursday, we'll drop another one. Appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Well, that is a wrap here on the Mobile Hunters Dojo. We're going to drop a new podcast every Thursday at 5 a.m. Do us a favor. Go give us a follow over at Instagram at the Mobile Hunters Dojo. Also, if you could leave us a 5-star review at Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it helps us out a lot. Thanks a lot. We look forward to seeing you again back here at the Mobile Hunters Dojo.